Okay. Here's another one that I want to share with you all, give my comment on that I've been seeing a few times on Facebook, and sadly it was from people in my friend list and family members that's been sharing this, and I thought it's so stupid. And I hate that we keep falling for this, sharing stuff that we think is, oh, this is so woke. You know, this person is really outlining the racism in America, and it's not. It's just stupid. So
Hey, good morning. Everything's racist. Even these.
Did you know that no trespassing signs like these are directly linked to slavery in the US? This professor spent over a decade uncovering the awful truth behind these signs. Apparently, it goes back to the 1600s and the arrival of British colonizers in America.
England has very strict trespass laws. The moment you cross into someone else's land, it's a serious crime. If you poach on someone else's land, one of the penalties was transportation to the American colonies. But once the settlers got to North America, all of English law gets thrown out, and they develop a distinctly new set of laws.
And one of the key elements is this: trespassing is not a crime.
Under slavery, on most plantations, a large share of the food that enslaved people had eaten was stuff they produced themselves, because those white landowners would provide them with cornmeal and with fatback, which is like bacon but less meat and more fat. No one could live just on that. And so everything else, all the vegetables, all the eggs, all the meat except for fatback, all of that was either fished, hunted, grown, or foraged.
But all of that changed after the Civil War in 1865, when slavery was abolished.
By the end of the Civil War, all formerly enslaved people are now free. And then there's new elections, but at that point, only white people can vote. And so these all-white electorates vote for all-white legislatures. And some of the first laws they make are laws criminalizing trespass. And it happens across the South, making it more difficult to feed yourself by limiting hunting, by limiting fishing, by prohibiting foraging. After slavery, you could pretty much feed yourself without working for your former slave owner. And so there's this asymmetry in which these white landowners desperately need black workers. But black people don't need these white landowners because they can feed themselves. Part of the reason I know they were doing this against black people is they said, we are doing this specifically to make them work for us. It will confine them more.
Essentially, these white landowners were trying to continue as many of the conditions of slavery as possible after it actually ended. But their attempts went even further than no trespassing laws.
Mississippi and South Carolina tried to institute laws, for example, called the Black Codes, where if a black person worked for a white person, they were required to call them master, and they would need written permission to.
okay, so I guess what they're trying to say here, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can, which I'm pretty sure people will do in the comment section. What they're trying to say is basically that the black people, after they were newly freed from slavery, that they were self-sufficient because they were going on white people's property to forage, and because that wasn't illegal, technically, that should have been allowed. I'm not going to get to my main point now. I'm going to let this ridiculous video finish, and then I'm gonna light into it.
Master, and they would need written permission to leave their workplace. Not having a job was a crime, whether you needed a job or not.
And then there were the fines that came with these crimes. Fines so high that few people could actually afford.
Wait, I'm gonna have to research into that, but when was it against the law in America to not have a job? Especially since in this particular time in America and across the world in general, the working structure was very different. Most people, jobs were not like they are today when it comes to employment. A lot of people were self-sufficient and lived on the land and traded. There were worker-employee relationships, but it was nothing like today. It wouldn't be like that for some time after. So I'm a little confused as to when was this? law? Maybe I never heard of it and it actually existed, but when was it illegal to not be employed by someone? I'm really confused about this one.
So to pay them off, black Americans were basically pushed into forced labor.
They could sell you to a white employer for the number of months it would take for you to repay the fine. So you would have an auction on the courthouse steps. It was indistinguishable from an auction of a slave that had happened 5 or 10 years before. If you see a no trespassing sign, if you're wondering why it's a crime to go on someone's land, a big part of why is an effort by white landowners to disadvantage black workers right after the Civil War.
So it was to keep black people from stealing, to get you off their land, and to make it, and to criminalize foraging on somebody else's land. It's that what they're saying? Listen, here's my main point and what I want to get at. Because I think a lot of this is stupid. And when I see people, whether it's white people or Middle Easterners or Hispanic or anybody else, non-white, non-black, when I see them make videos, these TikToks or whatever videos like this, I often ask, what is your purpose? Like real life. What is your motivation? Are you trying to inform black people of something, to build them up? Or are you trying to further perpetuate the victim mentality that's been existing in this modern culture to the detriment of African Americans? And I ask that because there is no real advantage to talking about this particular topic. Like, think about it for a second. What issue do we have today with trespassing and slavery and white supremacy? That for us to know about this and be informed would uplift us. Only thing that I see this doing is causing more harm. All it does is further perpetuate this feeling of despair, hopelessness, and depression, and feeling like, and like the orphan syndrome, where you feel like you don't have a home, you don't have a country, you're not at home here. Because I don't see any relevancy in the topic whatsoever where this is important to point this out for black people in any way. So I question, what is your purpose? One of the bigger parts that I want to mention is that if you're going to make a video about the history of racism and how something that we don't think of as being racist today, but how it's still steeped in racism, they don't do videos about that. How we still have institutions and relics of racism and slavery and white supremacy that's perpetrated by white liberals and Democrats that's still in effect today. Why don't you do a video on those? One of them being abortion. One of the original institutions of white supremacy, racism, that its whole origin and agenda was the purpose of white supremacy. Like, they literally believed that white people were the superior race, and they wanted to weed out through eugenics other races, black people, and basically anybody that wasn't white. That was the purpose of abortion. That was literally the foundings of Planned Parenthood. That has not changed. Yet you have black people defending it to this day. You want to talk about relics from the past that are current activities today that black people defend? That we don't, I can't even say that we don't know the full details of the history, because by now most black people in America have heard it. But they're so brainwashed that they say, "Oh, it's not the same. It's somehow different. This is women's health care. This is for women's health," and you believe it. The same institution of people that brought it into existence are the same ones that tell you that it's women's health care, and you believe it. You get upset when somebody opposes it. When you look up the numbers and statistics, it's clearly doing what it was put into place to do, which is get rid of large number of black people and other non-white people. That is actually one of the reasons why black Americans today is the only group of race in this country that hasn't grown in decades. Our numbers and percentage in comparison to the rest of the country and the other races hasn't grown. That is the sole reason. But you, as a black person, still defend racism. I mean, not racism, abortion. Why aren't these liberals making videos on this? Another one of the big ones, even though abortion is the biggest one. Minimum wage. Why aren't any liberals making videos on that? That was another institution that was implemented to keep blacks, women, and other minority groups to beat them out of the workforce. That's how they became competitive, by being able to work for the least amount of money. And you had somebody that society may have seen as desirable requiring much more money. But you had black people, women, Hispanics willing to work for a lot less. This is why the minimum wage laws were brought in, to cut out those bottom workers that were willing to work for less. So if you required for a job to pay, let's say $10 an hour, when somebody else is willing to work for, let's say, $3, and the $10 an hour is what they were getting paid, and what they saw their worth as. Nobody was going to pay a black person, woman, Hispanic, or other minority $10 an hour. What they saw, and through their racist eyes, is that, oh, well, the far superior worker is the white worker, so I'll pay them. I'll hire them instead of hiring the other one for $10, since it's illegal to pay them $3 or $4 or $5 an hour. I'll take the white worker for $10. That was the origin of minimum wage. The minimum wage laws has never helped anybody. It's never helped society. It's never done any of that. The only thing the minimum wage laws has ever done is cut out a sector of work. That's it. It doesn't ensure you're going to get paid that higher amount. It just cuts out that bracket of work. That's all it does. But nobody's making videos on that. And there's tons of other institutions that are actually derived from slavery and racism that are still common practices today that nobody else talk about. But we're talking about a no trespassing sign. The same way that another video was talking about how the tipping system originated through racism and white supremacy. Things that nobody really give a shit about. But we're talking about that goofy stuff, but we're not talking about the actual ones that are still going on today. I don't get it. Well, that's all I'm going to say for this video. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you loved it, subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications of new videos in the future. That's it. Peace.